Sam Shade to Alabama A&M makes so much sense. And I know that we were looking in different directions, but I think the Bulldogs made the right hire. Oh, yeah, it's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me, making Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day, every day of 2024, all the way from January 1st to December 31st. And hopefully you're going to do the same thing in 2025 on January 1st tomorrow. This is your first and last listen of the day and possibly of 2024. So shout out to you. Shout out to my everydayers. Love y'all. I want to wrap up today's episode by taking a look at the impact of the NCAA's JUCO eligibility rulings, not only on the SWAC and Malachi Bailey immediately, but how this could impact HBCUs as a whole moving forward. It's a one-year deal that I think is going to be expanded and should be used to the benefit of all historically Black colleges and universities. Segment 2, we're going to look at Norfolk State women's basketball because I know they're not guaranteed a spot in March Madness, but if they make it, what they've been able to do in their out-of-conference schedule has set them up so beautifully that I can't wait to see what the seeding looks like. But in segment 1, Sam Shade to Alabama A&M. Look at that. We go SWAC, MEAC, HBCUs as an entirety. We closing out 2024 with a bang, ain't we? So anyway, Sam Shade to Alabama A&M makes so much sense to me. It is just a extremely logical hire. And I know we were looking this way and that way, and no one really knew exactly what was going to happen. We thought maybe Ed Reed was going to be the coach. We talked about a lot of that on yesterday. But Sam Shade ended up being the person that Alabama A&M went with. And I think that this is not only a good hire, but I think it's the correct hire. Not only with knowing how that interview process went, but then also in just looking at what Sam Shade can provide from a recruiting aspect in the state of Alabama. He gives you a proven coach with recruiting ability, right? If we're talking recruiting, well, Ed Reed probably been a better recruiter because he's Ed Reed. Okay, I give you that. That might have been a legit argument that Ed Reed could have been a great recruiter. But at the same time, I know that Sam Shade is a great recruiter in addition to being a highly successful head coach. So while I may know one side could be better on one aspect or for one candidate, I know one side is better for the other candidate as well. I firmly believe Sam Shade is a better head coach than Ed Reed. And I know he provides me with recruiting. I don't know what Ed Reed's coaching would be like. I just know he got good recruiting. Probably. Can't even say no. So anyway, let's keep pushing. Sam Shade is a hire that I ain't going to say I predicted because I didn't predict. But on our Christmas episode, I said Dr. Alvin Parker, Sam Shade, and Teddy Keaton. Those are 3 unwrapped gifts for the HBCU landscape. And they could have gone any way. I think Norfolk State was open at that time, if I'm not mistaken. Delaware State was definitely, Norfolk State had just been filled by Michael Vick. So Delaware State was open. I thought Parker had a chance there. Alabama A&M was open, and I thought that Shade had a chance here, and also with Keaton. I thought Keaton and Shade had a chance in the SWAC schools. It's not over. Mississippi Valley State is still there, but I don't necessarily know if that's the route that they want to take. We'll see. The reason I like Sam Shade is because look at the success that he's had on a multitude of levels. He's had success as a player. So you immediately have some sort of championship culture kind of indoctrinating you in a certain way. So it's embedded in who you are. Now it's a matter of, are you able to apply? Because everybody who's a part of a championship team can't lead a championship team. We've seen people who have been second fiddle on a championship team, if we're talking basketball, try to be a number one elsewhere, and it doesn't translate. But for Shade, it has. Shade, he went from being a championship as a player, then he went to the high school ranks, and he had a championship there. Then he went to the collegiate ranks on the D2 level. He has a championship here. It follows a pattern. Is he able to bring that championship to Alabama A&M? When you're really looking at Sam Shade, he's an Alabama boy, right? Like at the end of the day, Sam Shade is highly connected to the state of Alabama. And it doesn't just have to do with the roots of this is where he's from. It doesn't just have to do with the fact that he had high school football here. It doesn't just have to do with the fact that he was at Miles. It doesn't just have to do with the fact that he's now at Alabama A&M. It doesn't have the fact to do with, it's not just the fact that he was at the University of Alabama. You see all of these connections. It's not just one of these, it's all of these. It's not just high school. It's not just where he coached collegiate. It's not just where he went to school collegiately. It's everything, and it's all of these different layers. So you look at the University of Alabama. I'm sure he has some sort of connections there, just as far as the area, maybe some of the things you looked at, maybe some strength and conditioning conversations, right? Like the ability to talk to people to mold a program is valuable. We don't only shape our program based on who we bring into the building. Sometimes it's how do we get to who we want to bring into the building. It's a level after level after level. So having conversations with people and understanding how to build a winner, how to build a championship program is important. We don't use the word program enough in college football or in college athletics. We don't say that enough. See, we say team. We say, oh, look at what they did in the tenure. But when we're talking about a program is something that can be followed. A program is something that in the day and age of, not even day and age, in the culture that is college athletics, players leave. You don't get to keep them for 10 years. If they're there for 10 years, it's because of injuries after injuries after injuries, but you do not keep players that long. That's why I like to use the word program more often. Maybe I'll try to do that more frequently. It's a program that you have to follow when you keep replacing talent. And that doesn't even have to start with the transfer portal. Right? Like this starts with just the literal culture. It's a time limit on how long you can play football on a collegiate ranks. I think he's built a program. And I think he has the makings of building a program at Alabama A&M. Being at Miles and then saying, okay, cool, I can just go to Alabama A&M and I already got the state on lock. I've been doing this. So now I know I can go up here and hit the same houses, maybe hit more houses because I know, oh, well, maybe he didn't want to go D2, but he can go FCS. I can pull this kid now. Those conversations are real. When I highlight all of the connections, and let me do it again, from Alabama, won a high school championship in Alabama, went to University of Alabama, coached at Miles. We're all in the state. We're all in the state here. These are so many different areas to pull from. Do I pull from my Alabama connections on how to build my program? Do I build with some of the kids? Maybe they have brothers that I coached in high school. Maybe it's just the Miles kid that I was already with. Maybe it's the Miles kid that I was recruiting, but wanted to go FCS. Things ain't quite work out. You're in the portal, but you want to stick on the FCS level. I believed in you then, and I believe in you now. These are aspects that you can pull from. I know your mama. Like these are traits that you can't buy. I know your family. I grew up with your family because we're really from here. These are aspects that, much as we talk about this type of coach and that type of coach, being from an area is different. And let's not forget, he didn't just win the SIAC. He won a playoff game. And by winning a playoff game, that screams to me competing nationally. That screams to me building a program. It's not apples and oranges, but I'm going to make this comment. It's not apples and oranges, but I'm going to make this comparison. Miles's ability to go and win a playoff game tells me that not only can you build a program that wins your conference, the SIAC and HBCU conference, you can also compete on a national level. One of the bigger gripes about Connell Maynard is that out of conference, specifically money games, were things that he didn't really care about. I'm not saying that I'm not saying you're going to get shade into the room and all of a sudden you're beating Alabama, but maybe you schedule some FCS competition and you win those games. Maybe it's like, okay, we aren't going to win these huge money games, but against this G5 team, against this upper level FCS team, we're going to beat them. It's an attitude. A lot of times the culture you present is how your players perform. And I don't know if just saying money games, well, screw them, we don't care, well, at least I got the check, that could extend to some games against FCS competition, against Group of 5 competition. I don't think that's the culture that Sam Shade's going to build. It's not in one-to-one comparison, but it makes sense to me. So shout out to Shade. I think that this is also similar to Chennis Berry going from Benedict College to South Carolina State. I talked about the rise of D2 HBCU coaches. I talked about it. Matter of fact, Sam Shade is going to be the catalyst for the first half of this week. Yesterday it was surprised about Ed Reed. This time it's about how great of a hire he was. And tomorrow we're going to break down some false narratives. I ain't going to say no more than that. I'm not going to say any more than that. But we're going to kick off the year just, what's it called? We're going to put some sage in the room, man. We're going to get all these negative and false narratives out of the way. And I'm going to pat myself on the back a little bit about some D2 coaches. That's my only tease. Now let's push forward. Let's push forward and look at Norfolk State women's basketball. Because what they've done in out-of-conference play in 2024 is going to set them up so perfectly if they are able to make it to March. And we'll look at that as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Rocket Money. Did you know? Rocket Money helps you find any subscriptions that you forgot about or maybe were paying twice for. It definitely has happened to others. It's happened to me as far as subscriptions that I forgot about. And I love that Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's almost like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel unwanted subscriptions, monitor your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, whether it's building or spending habits, or even goals that you want to hit. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of 500 million in canceled subscriptions for saving members up to $740 a year. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedoncollege. As we continue rolling with today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, check out all of my conference shows. We're talking college football playoffs. We're talking overall conference supremacy in these bowl games. All of these things are big for my brother and sister show. So make sure you are checking that out. Norfolk State women's basketball is on an absolute tear right now. When you really look at what the Spartans are able to do in out of conference, it's difficult for me not to look towards March. But I want to get this out the way already. This is not about a guarantee that they're going to make it. If they don't make it to March, nothing they did in this out-of-conference schedule matters. You can't guarantee that because they still have to go through Howard. They still have to go through the rest of the MEAC. They still have to get through the tournament. So there's so many factors at play. But what I will say is you look at what Norfolk State women's basketball has done. And currently they are, let's see, I want to make sure I get their record correct. I think they're 12-4. Right. So, yeah, they're 12-4. Let me read to you the 4 games that Norfolk State women's basketball has lost before I start telling you about why their out-of-conference game or out-of-conference performance was so great. They lost to Alabama by 10 points. Close game in the fourth quarter. Very tight. They lost to Washington State in a tournament in Puerto Rico. Right. That's another, I guess technically that's a mid-major. But they also lost to Green Bay. All right, cool, whatever. And then they lost to North Carolina. North Carolina is the only game they got blown out in. The only one. These other games, they're either winning or they're competing. But you know what? I don't want no consolation. And you don't need a consolation. So I don't need to say, oh, man, look at how competitive that they were against Alabama A&M or against Alabama. I don't need to say that. You know why? Because they knocked off 2 other SEC schools. They knocked off Auburn. They knocked off Missouri. We looked at that. Matter of fact, they knocked off Wyoming, too. And though Wyoming is technically a mid-major, if we went by football standards, if we went by football rankings, it would go Power 5, Group of 5, and then it would go to the FCS level. If we're doing it that way, if we are. But you know what? Still an impressive victory, in my opinion. But you look at what they were able to do against Mizzou, and it's the fact that you got Kierra Wheeler. You know you got Diamond Johnson. Against Mizzou, Johnson went 17 points, 4 assists. You're looking at 14 points from Kierra Wheeler with an additional 8 rebounds. But then you got Nia Fields, who adds there. So you have Fields who can chime in with those 2. But it ain't over. You look at the game against Wyoming. Against Wyoming, it was Diamond Johnson again. She had 18. Kierra Wheeler, 15. She actually had a double-double in that game, 15 and 10. You're going to see a common thread, but there's going to be one time that that thread is broken. Against Auburn this past game, you have 29, excuse me, that's the wrong team. You have 17 from Diamond Johnson. Kierra Wheeler does not have a big game. She only has 6 points. She only has 3 rebounds. It's a really slow game for her, right? That's cool. She only played 28 minutes. But you know who did step up? Debria Clark. And when you have another person in Clark who hits 15, 15 and 5. Meanwhile, Johnson's getting 11 boards in this game. What you see about Norfolk State women's basketball is that they have 2 stars. They have Diamond Johnson and Kierra Wheeler. But I just said Debria Clark, right? So you have the stars in Johnson and Wheeler. But then you look at Clark, you look at Fields, who in these games against the Wyomings, against the Auburns, against the Mizzous, like against these teams, it can't always just be the Diamond Johnson, Kierra Wheeler show, and it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. It can be Nia Fields stepping up, getting into double digits. It can be Debria Clark stepping up, getting into double digits. You see this. But when I'm talking about this season, the reason it's impressive going into March, because you may say, oh, they beat Auburn. Cool, SEC school. They beat Mizzou. Cool, SEC school. Norfolk State has 2 SEC victories on their resume and out of conference schedule, and they knocked off Wyoming. So that's 3 really quality wins. I understand they're not guaranteed to get to March. I gave that disclaimer in the beginning. But let's say they do. What kind of seeding are we looking forward to? Are we looking at a 14 seed? I think a lot of that will have to depend on how they perform in MEAC play. If they go undefeated in MEAC play and they have an Auburn on their resume, they have a Wyoming on their resume, and they have a Mizzou on their resume. I don't care how good Mizzou or Auburn is. This is a Power 4 school that an HBCU knocked off. We all know that the out-of-conference schedule for HBCUs is not set up for success when you're talking about seeding in March. I would argue for Norfolk State, that's a different conversation. Last year, they were a 15 seed, and they went 27-6 overall. They don't have a win of that caliber. If you're just looking at what they did last year, they dominated the MEAC. They only had 1 loss into getting a 15 seed. If you run the table in the MEAC and you have Mizzou and Auburn on your resume as an HBCU, that may be grounds for a 14 seed. We'll have to see how everything plays out. But if they absolutely come out and crush it, especially seeing that they were in March Madness the last 2 seasons prior, a lot of this has to do with, oh, you keep doing this. I see. You're actually a real contender. You've really built a program. It's the word of the day. Program. But gosh, Norfolk State women's basketball, the Spartans are some dogs. It was actually a really good day for Norfolk State basketball, period, because you got to look at the men's side too, and we're only going to give them just a brief second. But when you're looking at who they beat, Coach let off a little bit of a little look, man, it's just High Point. It's just a big South school. I don't know why we were 14-point underdogs. That was hilarious to me. I just want to give that sound bite as we check out of here. But as we push forward, the JUCO ruling, Malachi Bailey's already taking advantage of it. Malachi Bailey is already taking advantage of it. But what about schools? We see what players are doing, but how can schools take advantage of the ruling that JUCO eligibility does not count for this upcoming season? I don't even think it's going to stop there. But let's look at it all as we continue and wrap up today's episode of Locked On HBCU. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to segment 3, and I thank you 2 times for that. I'm laughing to myself because I'm already knowing they're going to call this a rant too, but that's cool. It's love. I just talk with passion, y'all. I'm not upset. I was confused on Friday, though. Let's talk about this JUCO ruling. So first off, let's break down what the ruling is, and then I'll give you the exact quote. So the ruling is basically that if you play JUCO at any point in your career, and you are going to be in, and you are on your last year of eligibility this season that is, I guess, past, depending on who you're looking at, you will have the ability to have 1 more year, right? So let's say you were a senior who went to JUCO for 2 years, and this is your last year of eligibility. The NCAA said, you know what, you get 1 more. Doesn't matter if you spent 2 years or not, you get 1 more. Okay, cool. All this comes from the Vanderbilt quarterback basically getting a ruling for him in the state of Tennessee that, yeah, we're not going to count this JUCO against your NCAA eligibility. I don't know how the state did that without the NCAA, but the company, the organization, the institution, the NCAA quickly followed up. And this is the quote. The NCAA Division I Board of Directors, that's important because this doesn't count for D2, right? This does not count for D2. When you read that, that might be the most important part, at least second most important part, is who this applies to. So Union? Mm-mm. Virginia State? Mm-mm. Miles College? No. So this is just for the D1 schools. I'm going to assume this also applies. Yeah, it does apply. I'm going to assume this applies to FCS because they were D1 AA, but I'm going to assume this applies there too. Especially since they play every other sport in Division One. But the NCAA Division I Board of Directors granted a waiver to permit student athletes who attended and competed at a non-NCAA school for 1 or more years to remain eligible and compete in 2025/26. If those student athletes would have otherwise used their final season of competition during the 2024/25 academic year and meet all other eligibility requirements. Okay. What does this mean? Let's be quick. So first off, Malachi Bailey saw that and said, I'm hopping out the NFL draft and I'm going to the transfer portal. Cool. Makes a lot of sense. That's how it impacted the SWAC already. He could have came back and went to Alcorn. He didn't know. I get it. I get it. You're trying to maximize your draft stock. You want to go elsewhere for the final year that you have. This is going to become regular. This is going to turn to a point like the transfer portal where, I no longer have to sit out. Now I can go transfer anywhere. I can transfer 2-3 places now. Like, you see these things grow. It's going to get to a point, right? When you're looking at it, it's going to get to a point from where right now, if you were about to run out of eligibility this season, you get to one more year. The JUCO ruling is going to expand to the point where all the time you spend at JUCO does not count. I don't know when it's going to happen, but I think it's going to be relatively soon that if you spend 2 years in JUCO, you get 4 NCAA years. I genuinely see that coming. I should have put on my JUCO polo, but that's neither here nor there. I don't feel like doing a costume change. How the SWAC, how HBCUs in general, I was going to say SWAC and MEAC, but shout out to my independents. How they need to use this is go look for quarterbacks. Once they expand this and say, yeah, JUCO doesn't matter, go get you the experienced quarterback. The guy who's been in the college ranks, maybe not NCAA, because they get this amount of time, but go get the collegiate player who's been in college for 3-4 years. I do believe that as we get into this growing eligibility, the idea of being seasoned becomes significantly more important and valuable, and there's no more position is valuable at than the quarterback position. The guy who's seen so many things. It's the reason we pull in transfer quarterbacks so often, because that seasoning is what matters. I think if you're the HBCUs, we already seen one player leave. That's how it impacted. But is that really a loss for Alcorn? I don't think so. I don't view Malachi Bailey leaving as a loss for Alcorn because he was supposed to be going to the NFL draft. So you already had him out of your 2025 plans anyway. Moving forward, though, I'm looking for quarterbacks who played at the JUCO ranks. If I am an HBCU and I know how important quarterback play is, and it's not great around the board, let's just be very clear. It is not great around the board. I'm looking for that. That's what I'm looking for. So that's the easy, quick, dry method of it. Go look for quarterbacks. Go look for offensive linemen. Go look for players like that who have been experienced and can ease into your situation or into your system a lot easier. Whew, this is something else, y'all. I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. I don't know what we're going to talk about tomorrow. It could be Jackson State. Ed Reed could be hired. I don't know. We'll wait. In the meantime, in between time, I hope Ed Reed isn't hired because that means I'm recording this Sunday morning. I'm probably going to be outdated. But anyway, if he is, we'll talk about how official it is on Tuesday. I'm not re-recording that first segment. I love that. In the meantime, in between time, until next time that we hear each other, family, take care. Stay blessed. Peace.